Narayanam namaskritya Narang chaiva narottamam Deving Sarasating Vyasam Tato Jayamudirayet Nashta Praeshu Bhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavatyuttama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtaki. Hare Krishna. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Amantriya Amantriya Tang Munivarang Anugyataha Sahanuga Prataste Ratam Aruhya Sabharya Swapurang Nipa Amantritang Munivarang Amantritang Munivarang Anugyatah Sahanuga Prataste Ratang Aruhya Sabharya Sapurang Nirpa Uphayor Rishikulyaya Uphayor Rishikulyaya Sarvastya Suruddhaso Sarvastya Surodhyas Sarasvatya Surodhaso Vishinang Upashantanang Vishinam Upasantanang Pasyan Ashrama Sampada Pasyanashrama Sampada Amantritang Munivaram Agyatah Sahanagaha Prataste Ratam Aruhya Sabharya Sapurang Nipaha Ubhayor Rishikulyaya Sarasvatya Surodhaso Shinam Pushantanang Pushyanashrama Sambhata. Nugyata Sahaganaga Prataste Ratam Aruhya Sabharya Saparang Nipa Ubhayor Shikulyaya Sarasvatya Surodhaso Shina Santana Pushyanashrama Sambhata. So just in the interest of speeding up, any ladies like to say it? Amantirtang Munivarang Anugyatak sahanagaha Prataste ratang arukya Sabharya swaparang nipa Ubhayor rishikulyaya Saraswatya surodhaso Jinam Santanam Pushyanashrama Sampada Amantriya, taking permission to go. Tam, from him, Karma, Munivaram, from the best of sages. Anugyata, being permitted to leave. Saha Anugaha, along with his retinue. Prataste, started for. Ratam Arukhya, mounting his chariot. Sabharya, along with his wife. Sapuram, his own capital. Nipa, the emperor. Ubhayo, both. Rishikulyaya, agreeable to the sages. Sarasatya, of the river Saraswati. Surodhaso, the charming banks. Rishinam, of the great sages. Upashantanam, tranquil. Pashyan, seeing. Ashrana Sambhata, the prosperity of the beautiful hermitages. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace Srila Prabhupada. After asking and obtaining the great sage's permission to leave, the monarch mounted his chariot with his wife and started for his capital, followed by his retinue. Along the way, he saw the prosperity of the tranquil seer's beautiful hermitages on both the charming banks of the Saraswati, the river so agreeable to saintly persons. Purport: as cities are constructed in the modern age with great engineering and architectural craftsmanship, so in days gone by, there were neighborhoods called Rishikulas, where great saintly persons resided. In India, there are still many magnificent places for spiritual understanding. There are many rishis and saintly persons living in nice cottages on the banks of the Ganges and Yamuna for purposes of spiritual cultivation. While passing through the Rishikulas, the king and his party were very much satisfied with the beauty of the cottages and hermitages. It is stated here, Pashyan Ashrama Sambhata. The great sages had no skyscrapers, but the hermitages were so beautiful that the king was very much pleased at the sight. Umagyanatimirandhasya Gyananjana Shilakaya Chakshurun Mityangdina Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamahyang Dadati Sabadantika. So just a note on verse construction. I don't know if this will be useful or not, but for me, I liked it when I first learned it. The verses are organized into short and long sounds. That's the standard shloka meter. And so, for example, the beginning, A is long, and N-T-R-Y-A is long, mantriya. So you can kind of elongate that. Tung, muni, so M-M-U. So two consonants together or a long vowel. And the other words, Nivaram. So Nivaram, they're just pronounced quickly. Nivaram. So Anugyata, aha, sa. Aha, sa are two consonants together. Anugyata, sahanuga. So nuga at the end is quick. So anugyata, sahanuga. So I don't do it perfectly myself either, but so it's an interest. I think it's an interesting. It's interesting to know because that's. So, for example, you wouldn't say swapurang, swapurang. No, supurang. It's said quickly because those are all short. Supurang, sabharya, supurang. Anyway, so I think sometimes it's useful to know. So, this, just to discuss this briefly, and then we're going to talk a little about Dayananda. Till 9 o'clock? So this verse, Swayambhuva Manu and his wife, it was referred to as the Swayambhuva Manu is referred to as the emperor. So the emperor, the monarch, he's now leaving. So previously, I just marked a couple of these just to, as a review. So Kardama Muni, first he had the darshan of Vishnu. And he was asking that I want to have a wife and progeny. And Vishnu promised him that his part, his plenary part, as Prabhupada calls his, in other words, Vishnu himself was going to incarnate as his son. So this is a conversation between, another interesting feature of the Bhāgavatam that I've always found interesting is that this is a conversation between Sutta and Shonika in Naimisharanya. So Naimisharanya is the forest, and they're performing a 1,000-year sacrifice. So conversation between Sutta and Shonika. And then Sutta talks about a conversation between Vidura and Maitreya. And then Maitreya tells the story of Swayambhuva Manu and Kardama Muni. So we have kind of a story within a story within a story, almost, and now we're encountering the narration between, or the dialogue between Swayambhuva Manu and Kardama Muni. So Kardama Muni, he got the audience of Vishnu, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and he received the boon that, yes, you'll have 9 daughters, and I will appear as my part. So that's already known. Now then, Swayambhuva Manu appeared, and Kardama Muni praised him. So in response to Kardama Muni's praise, Swayambhuva Manu was a monarch, an emperor, but still he offered his respects to the sage, to Kardama Muni. And he said, it's my good fortune that I've been able to see you, for you cannot easily be seen by persons who have not subdued the mind or controlled the senses. I'm all the more fortunate to have touched with my head the blessed dust of your feet. So you can imagine this emperor, Manu himself. Manu is the progenitor of mankind, and he lives for, I don't know, somebody who's expert at the lifetime of Manu, but he lives for something like 14 Mahayugas, and the Mahayugas, and I'm sure I make a mistake here, but something like 4.2 million years times 14, something like that. Anyway, huge long time. So that's Manu, incredibly exalted person. So he respects Kardama, the sage. So yes, the sage says, Kardama Muni says, certainly I have a desire to marry, and your daughter has not yet married or given her word to anyone. Therefore, our marriage according to Vedic system can take place. So he speaks, and Swayambhu Manu, they perform the wedding ceremony, and Swayambhu Manu feels separation from his daughter. He releases his daughter, and she becomes Kardama Muni's wife, Devahuti. So in this verse, after asking and obtaining the great sage's permission to leave, the monarch, the emperor, Swayambhu Manu, mounted his chariot with his wife, Sabharya. It says, what is that at the beginning? In fourth line, Sabharya. Sapuram Nripa. Nripa means the leader of men, the king. Pura means his city, like we know the word Jagannath Puri. So Puri, Pura, Swa means his own. And Ubhuyo Rishi Kulyaya. So all the Rishi Kulas, Prabhupada says in the purport, they're called Rishi Kulas. The place, like we know Gurukula, Rishi Kulas, all the places of the rishis, they're peaceful, shanta, upashantanam, shanti means peaceful. And he was seeing the king Pushyan, he was seeing these ashrama sampada. Sampada means opulent or developed. So our concept in the modern world is that New York City is developed, or Mumbai. I went to Mumbai. I couldn't figure out which is more developed, Mumbai or New York City. It's an amazing city, and I suppose if I had gone to Beijing, it would be similarly developed. So we think that this is development, but these rishis were living on the banks of the Saraswati, and their hermitages were, this great monarch was appreciating the hermitages of the sages. So we can imagine how beautiful and natural these hermitages were. In the Vedas, there's a section of the Vedas. Vedas are divided into Samhita, Brahmana, and Aranyaka. And the Aranyakas contain many of the Upanishads. So Aranyaka, it can be interpreted in a few ways. It can be interpreted as for the people who live in the forest, like the sages, or it can be interpreted by the sages who live in the forest, and it can also be interpreted as meaning for or by those who live outside the city, at least in the wilderness. So in many traditions, like in the Middle East, those traditions from the Middle East, They used to go in the desert. Moses went on the mountains. So you don't get spiritual realization in the marketplace. They often, the sages often describe that avoid the marketplace. The sadhus avoid the marketplace because it's a place of sense gratification, a materialistic place. And they looked to get away from so-called civilization. So this is the sages, the Rishi Kula. Rishi Kulas were on the banks of the Saraswati. And the emperor was appreciating that they were prosperous in their own way. Krishna provides, Prabhupada says in the Ishavasyamidang sarvang yatkincha jagatyang jagat tena tyaktena bunjita magrid kasya suddhanam. He says that that we should accept our quota and that Krishna supplies enough for our needs and for liberation. So we get enough to perform arti, to worship, to practice yoga or whatever the practice is for liberation. So these rishis had certainly prosperity according to their desires. Their desires were not materialistic. So I was asked, this is Dayananda's, can you switch that? This is I have to admit, this is a little self-serving, but a lot of things, it's been a long time since this is 1968. This is a Rath Yatra. And I think this is, somebody said this is Jayapataka Swami in the middle. He just joined in 68. Huh? Uh-huh. I don't know, maybe you can look more closely, but somebody said that was. And so Jayananda is here on the left. Can anybody not see who Jayananda is? He's got jeans or something. That's right. Yeah. Why don't you stand up and point? You can stand up and point. Okay. And that's me in the middle. As I said, it's a little self-serving. Right here? Yeah. And then below me is Tamal, Krishna Maharaj. And then there's Gargamuni just to the left of Jayananda. He's looking at Jayananda. Yeah, that's right. That's Gargamuni and Tamal. And there's another devotee that I like very much. His name is Krishnadas, and he's all the way to the left below Gargamuni, and he has glasses. There, yes, that's Krishnadas. And he was the first GBC of Germany, and he was about 19 years old. And Prabhupada made him GBC of Germany. Other people, I can't. Okay. That's from here. So, of course, I like the picture because. So Jayananda was. Let me read some of that. Okay, we can switch away from this. I'm going to change to something else. So these are some eulogies of Prabhupada. So this is by Revati Nandan. Somehow I was thinking I was the only one who recounted this, but I guess everyone recounts everything. So Revati Nandan was a good friend also. He just died maybe a year or two ago. an old friend called from Hawaii, Madhukanta. He used to be vice president of LA. So he said, Revati Nandan's in the hospital and he's leaving. Revati Nandan was, he was a sannyasi in England, and he preached and encouraged many of the young future leaders of the British Yatra, like Vichitravirya and I can't think, Bhumadev and all these. One devotee became the temple president of Vrindavan, and they became very instrumental in the movement. So, and I was just talking to Radhanath Swami in Chopati, and somehow I mentioned Revati Nanda, and he said, yes, he remembered. When he came from India, if you read Radhanath Swami's book, one of his books anyway, he says that he came from India and passed through London. Of course, I remember I was the temple president of London, and Revati was there as a sannyasi. So he and Radhanath Swami really connected. And I'm really getting sidetracked here. So this is Revati Nandan. The room wasn't very big, and this is in Los Angeles. I was here also. And there were 40 or 45 of us in it, along with Prabhupada and a couple of guests. During the evening Bhagavad Gita classes, he would sit in a chair at one end of the room, and the rest of us packed in. One night, Prabhupada was looking around, and everybody was there but Jayananda. Everyone except Jayananda. Prabhupada said, "Where is Jayananda?" We said, "He's still out parking the van, Srila Prabhupada." So Prabhupada waited, and when Jayananda walked in, Prabhupada looked at him, smiled, and said, "Oh, Jayananda looks just like Lord Chaitanya." Jayananda blushed purple. He blushed and blushed because he was a homespun, shy, humble devotee. So I'll tell you my rendition of the same story. So in Los Angeles, we were going through some difficulty, and we lost the temple, and we had to manage somehow or other. Prabhupada was there, and then we eventually found a temple after 2-3 months. But in the meantime, the brahmacharis were living. These were San Francisco brahmacharis, so they had come to Los Angeles to do Harinam and little distribution. So Prabhupada was there, so they remained. So they got a house, and they did programs there, and Prabhupada would come and give lectures, as Revati says. And and the brahmachari, so this particular time, and this is recorded actually, somebody told me there's a recording of this, and you can hear that Prabhupada says, "Oh, Jayananda, he looks just like Lord Chaitanya." And so what had happened was that all of the brahmacharis had gotten new cloth. So in those days, we just got some kind of like polyester cloth off of a big yardage. So, but it looked really nice. I mean, and everybody was freshly shaven. So all these devotees, he says 40 or 45, I think that's a little exaggeration, but the room was definitely packed with all these brahmacharis, and they all had brand new cloth and shaved heads, and then Jayananda wasn't there. So Prabhu was sitting at one end, and sitting at one end, and the door in the back he was facing, but everybody else was facing Prabhupada and chanting japa, waiting for the program to start. And then Jayananda came in, and he was also dressed like that. He had new dress, freshly shaved. And then Prabhupada said, "Just exactly this. Jayananda looks just like Lord Chaitanya." And he blushed, it says. He blushed purple. He blushed and blushed because he was a homespun, simple guy. So, as I said, it's a little difficult for me to remember too much. So Dayananda and I joined about the same time in San Francisco. He was a little older. I was 21. He was about 27, just turning 28, something like that. Is that right? 6, 7. And he was driving a taxi. I think everyone who has sort of read the biographies and these kind of things, they know that. So one time, and we had a prasadam distribution at noon, and Malati, who was very forthright, she was organizing the prasadam distribution, doing a lot of the cooking, and then, so everyone was sitting there, and this one particular day, I didn't always take prasadam there, but this day I did, and then Malati got up, and she started berating everybody. She said, you people are not paying. Dayananda and my husband are supporting this whole program, and none of you are giving any donations. She was going on it, and I felt so small. I was sitting in the back. I was thinking, oh my God, because I was in that category. So after that, that was one of a few things that gave me a little impetus to get off my backside. So, because I really admired both Shamsundar and Dayananda, and the first Rath Yatra, just another self-serving mention, there's a picture, there's a little video of that first Rath Yatra, and this is the 68, this is the second one, that picture you just saw. But the first one was on a yellow flatbed truck, and Dayananda's in that. You can see very clearly. Dayananda's walking by in the video, and I appeared like for 1 second, so I was really pleased because I'm not in very many pictures, so it satisfied my ego to be there with Dayananda and everybody. So when I joined, I really looked up to Dayananda and Shamsundar and Mukunda and the others, Malati. So Dayananda was already a fixture in the temple. He was already taking responsibility. And then a few of us, me and Nandarani and Aniruddha, went to Los Angeles to try to open a little place there. So I didn't have any money. I borrowed $100 from Dayananda and $100 from another devotee. So after a couple of months, I was able to pay it back. I paid the other devotee, and then I tried to give the $100 back to Dayananda. He wouldn't take it. So that's the kind of person he was. And so we remained really good friends from that time, although we didn't always see each other. So then he gave $5,000 to Prabhupada in 1968. So he joined in maybe January of 67. So just 1 year later, he gave this $5,000 he had saved up, probably his life savings or something, to Prabhupada to publish the teachings of Lord Chaitanya. And so if you calculate, you can go on the internet. I just did. I don't know. I'm sort of fond of finding out how much the inflation is. So that's about 40-some thousand. It says more than 40,000 in today's money. So if you can imagine somebody who's just been a devotee for a little over a year, he gave Prabhupada this money and to publish the teachings of the Lord Chaitanya. And Prabhupada was always appreciative of that. that was right in the beginning. That was such a help because Prabhupada really wanted to have his books published and distributed. So in Los Angeles, we got a lot of these teachings of Lord Chaitanya. We put them in this storage area. And then Prabhupada was, I think we got them in 1969. So then a few months passed, and Prabhupada started getting on our cases that what's happening with the books? Are you distributing these books, or are you just taking them for yourselves? He was pushing already that, and we didn't know how to distribute books yet. So Dayananda then came from San Francisco to Los Angeles, and we were already in Los Angeles. Dayananda came with the other devotees. There were many future leaders of ISKCON in that group, like Tamal Krishna Maharaj and Madhuvisa. Madhuvisa became the GBC of Australia, and Revati Nandan, who I mentioned, was in England, who did a lot of service there. And he was like preaching to, or really bonding with Radhanath Swami, and Radhanath Swami really liked him. And there was Sudama, who went to, I think, Seattle and Portland maybe, and Shilavati, she was like the main pujari kind of ISKCON, and Kaushalya, who went with Prabhupada to India, and anyway, just a few, to mention a few. Vishnu Jan, of course. Vishnu Jan was very, very attractive. He had an attractive voice. Somehow he could enchant people just by his singing and his lecturing. And so, like that, these devotees came mostly from San Francisco, and then they kind of got trapped in Los Angeles because Prabhupada was there. And then, as I said, through some, partly it was my mistake that we lost the temple. I like to blame it on someone else, that it was 50% his fault, but since I was in charge, I have to accept the responsibility. But so we were without a temple for a short time and managing. And so all these people, including Dayananda, they were there. So when we got our new temple, then in contrast to most of the temples, it had a kind of a front compound, front yard. It was a wooden, kind of an old wooden Baptist church or something small. So Dayananda planted 108 rose bushes in front of the temple. And he was always working, although he went to university as an electrical engineer, I think somewhere in the Midwest. You probably know better than I do. But he was always working. He just loved to work with his hands. And there are many stories, devotees who experienced this. They talk about how he would be working on the Rath cart for Rath Yatra, and then somebody would be walking by and he would say, "Hey, can you come over here and hold this for me?" You know, so they would end up working with him all day or something. And there's a story somebody once told me. I don't know if this is true or not, but I really love it. I think it's so much Dayananda that there's a story that he went to the temple treasurer and he said, you know, "Can you give me a quarter, 25 cents? What do you need a quarter for?" He says, "Well, for a pack of cigarettes. I mean, this guy's been helping me all day and he wants a smoke or something." So he was, and like I said, it's unconfirmed, but I believe it. I think it's just something Jayananda would have done. So he was like that and so surrendered. And Prabhupada, as I said, really appreciated that first donation for the teachings of Lord Chaitanya. And people loved him. We used to go to the fruit and vegetable markets to get, fruits and vegetables, obviously, but they would give us as donations the fruits that were just ready to go off. They couldn't sell them because, they're selling them to retail stores, these bodegas and things. So they couldn't sell them because they were getting too ripe. So Jayananda would go. And then the service passed to somebody else. And so when this other person came, they were saying, "Where's Jim? Where's Jim?" So they really liked, everyone liked him. Just like the Goswamis. Dhira Dhira Jano. That song, how he was, the Dhiras and the Adhiras liked Jayananda. And yet at the same time, so Tamal Krishna Maharaj, Tamal Krishna Goswami, he was very good at organizing, and he used to be able to call on different devotees who he had worked with. And so when he did a service, like with this Radha Damodar traveling party, he called on different devotees like Revati Nandan, Jayananda, Vishnu Chand. They were each in charge of a bus. So that was another bit of that. He was sort of expert at maintaining relationships with devotees who were qualified as leaders. So even though Jayananda was this, as Revati says, a simple, shy, humble devotee, he was also able to take charge and manage. He was one of the first temple presidents of the San Francisco temple, and it's not as though he pushed himself forward as a manager, but then Tamal Krishna Goswami put him in charge of one of the buses, so he could also manage. Sridhar Swami used to be here. Anyone who's sort of been here long enough, they know that Sridhar Swami was here in New York. He split his time between New York and Mumbai and maybe some other places, but he was mostly here. I mean, mostly in those two places. And he was telling me some stories about Jayananda. They went, this is a very early on, Sridhar Swami had when he was a brahmachari, they had a van. They used to travel in a van, and they used to go around and distribute books around the country. So for a while, Jayananda was with them. So they went somewhere, and they went to chant Gayatri. And Jayananda apparently finished his Gayatri really quick. And so Sridhar Swami said, "Well, why did you finish? How did you finish so quickly?" So then he confided. He said, "Well, actually," he said, I didn't understand when Prabhupada gave us the mantras, and I never learned it. So it's probably hard for you to understand such a story, but we were progressing so quickly, and Prabhupada was introducing so many things to us that sometimes it was difficult to catch everything. And for example, the first time I heard the Samsara prayers, there was a record with the Samsara prayers, and this devotee had memorized the Samsara prayers, and I thought, this guy is brilliant. He's memorized the Samsara prayers. And so sometimes we would mumble along if we didn't know, or we would sort of fake it if we couldn't. You think that's funny? That's good. It's supposed to be funny. That's good. Thank you. Thank you for laughing. So in this way, we, Dayananda, and Rath Yatra, then he just became so devoted to Rath Yatra. And the first one was Shyam Sundar stepped forward. He had that little drawing. I'm just now reading Mukunda Goswami's diary. He's written a few books, I guess, 26 Second Avenue or something like that. And Matchless Gifts, I forgot the name of the book. But so I'm just at the point where he's talking about that Prabhupada gave him the drawing of the truck going by and how Jagannath could be put on the truck, that something could be fashioned with Jagannath on one side, Baladev on the other. And then, so then Shyam Sundar showed me that diagram, I remember. He said, Prabhupada told us to build this. So Dayananda was helping Shyam Sundar at that time, Shyam Sundar. That was the first Rath Yatra. The second one, then Dayananda. Everyone after then, I think Dayananda was really instrumental. And in the last one, 1976, I wasn't in the U.S. at the time, but I always heard the stories of the last Rath Yatra, how Toshan somehow miraculously got permission to go down Fifth Avenue. And then Dayananda came, even though he was so affected by the cancer. And then, of course, I guess most of you know that he refused to take medication at the end. I mean, what medication means is morphine. So when old people die, most old people, when they die, they give morphine before the end. So this is in most cases, actually. So you'd be surprised that that's what happens at the end, because it's a little painful, usually. I mean, maybe not. It happens suddenly or something. Somebody dies in their sleep or something. But people get cancer or they get something, kidney failure, liver, something. So they experience some pain, maybe a few weeks or a couple of months or something. And then they get morphine. My ex-wife, Nandarani, who was very instrumental in helping Prabhupada spread the movement, she got brain cancer. So morphine, yeah, very common. So I always admired that Dayananda refused. So he just tolerated the pain. So I just wanted to explain that, because it's uncommon that somebody would do such a thing, so that his mind would be clear, listening to tapes of Prabhupada. So he came to New York, 76, for the first Rath Yatra here. And then, of course, Rath Yatra used to be in San Francisco on the West Coast. So he was there for Rath Yatra in LA when it first started. I can't remember which year. So always instrumental in Rath Yatra, and always engaging people, just kind of on a grassroots level, just sort of grabbing a hold of people. Well, there's one story that I really like to tell, that I came, it must have been that year with the picture, 1968, that we drove to San Francisco from Los Angeles, a few of us. So I got out of the car, he grabbed me, Dayananda, come with me. So I figure it's either because, I just was the first person that he knew, that he saw, or because I was a little, in those days I was little, had some strength. It was probably, I was 22, 23 years old. So he grabbed me and he says, "Come on, Dayananda." And then, of course, I didn't know. Just, yeah, whatever you say, Dayananda. So then we went to this kitchen where there was, where they had made prasadam, because in the temple they didn't have a big kitchen to serve out all the people that would come to Rath Yatra. So they had managed to get like a soup kitchen, some kind of a kitchen where they, like some religious group or something. So they had these, what we used to call them reefers. They were walk-in refrigerator, reefer short for refrigerator. So they had these reefers, two of them, big ones, walk-in, and they have walk-in refrigerators here? Yeah, how many? We have one. So they had two, but one of them, the compressor had died, and so they had these big things of halava and chutney, like trash barrel size, whatever you call it, 50-gallon or something. I don't know how big, but like big trash barrel size. So when you fill up one of those with halava or chutney, it's really heavy. So it was just the two of us, and we had to roll these from one place to another. No question of picking it up or anything. We're just rolling it, and it was really hard, So I just loved that experience working with Dayananda. Maybe we didn't work often together, but so we managed to do it somehow. I couldn't believe how heavy those things were, though. Another time, this is kind of an odd story, but you had to sort of know the personalities involved. But Dayananda and I we had to go somewhere in Los Angeles, so we drove this. We had a little Volkswagen Beetle or Bug, whatever they call it. So we were driving somewhere, and just the two of us, and it seemed to get late in the afternoon. So now I have to explain about Tamal Krishna Maharaj. So Tamal Krishna was expert at controlling people, controlling men. So in ISKCON, this is my perspective anyway, that Prabhupada would kind of empower leaders based on how many men they could control. Some men were good at, they had a little charisma, and they could have a little party of 10 or 12, some 15, some 20. So he put them in charge of different countries or different areas. And then, but Tamal had this ability much beyond. And he was very organized, but he also had this ability of sort of, as nearly as I can say it, he could reach inside your mind and kind of get you to do something based on your own desire. You have some desire, and he knew what that was, and he would just squeeze it a little bit and get you to do something. So some devotees, he's a little controversial, some devotees don't like that, but since he never really did that to me, I didn't mind. I thought it was good. I thought it was a good thing that he could control and organize so well. And I know that Prabhupada liked it also. So, sorry, I have to tell these stories. So I know this is a little deviation, but this is such a Tamal story. So that, because I have to tell you what Tamal's like. So we just happened to come from two temples, and we came to New York, and we happened to fly on the same flight to India. So we're driving in the car together, and I was just like a lowly temple president, and he was big sannyasi. And so we're driving the car together, but I joined a year earlier before him, and I joined and I'm a year older than him. And so, and we were in Los Angeles together. Oh, when we were in Los Angeles together, I was the temple president and Dayananda was the vice president. So we're in the car together, and Tamal turns to me and says, Dayananda, you're like a father to me. I thought, some devotees would say that because I was like 22, 23 years old, and I had a kid already. And then other devotees would join like 18 years old, and I was already in the movement a few years, so they looked up to me as like a father, because they didn't know better, I guess. So Tamal said that. I thought, what? And so then we get out of the car, and he says, Dayananda, carry my bags. So that's an example of Tamal. So now back to the story. I'm driving with Dayananda. So remember I said I was kind of aloof from this hold that Tamal had on a lot of people. And remember I said that Dayananda joined the movement like a month before me or something, and he was older. He was older than Tamal and me by 7, 8 years. So we're driving somewhere, and then Dayananda turns to me and says, we better get back, Tamal will get mad. So that always, I mean, it's such a simple anecdote, and maybe it doesn't resonate with you, but I tried to give the backstory. I just thought, at the time, I thought it was so funny that here's Dayananda. I always really looked up to Dayananda, and then I looked up to Tamal too, but I wasn't afraid of him, and then here's Dayananda. He was afraid that Tamal would get mad. It was like a full circle, I guess. So I hope that by telling his stories, maybe I'm also trying to reveal our relationships among each other, So I'm hoping that maybe that's of some service to you. I like to give this. It should be an entertainment. Prabhu once told me that the people come to the Brahmin's house for entertainment. I thought, what? Isn't that knowledge? And then I thought about it a lot afterwards, that people, just everyday people, they don't kind of care about knowledge. They just want to have fun. They want to be entertained. So I hope this is a little entertaining. So yes, Dayananda was vice president. Then Prabhupada, as I said, was there in Los Angeles. So at one point, it was a little awkward because Tamal had come from, this is sort of briefly about San Francisco, but I mean about Los Angeles, but it kind of shows our relationships. So Tamal had come from San Francisco with his team, and I was in charge of the LA temple, but now it's transitioning because Tamal was capable of so much more than I was, organizationally, strategically, and his ability to control people. I mean, control in a good way. To motivate people, and yes. So what to do? So what's Prabhupada going to do? So then Prabhupada said one day that now we're going to have elections. And we already knew that he was a little skeptical of democracy. And elections? We'd never heard of such a thing. We're going to have elections for officers of the temple. So then he said, and I nominate Dayananda for temple president, Jayananda for vice president, Shilavati for pujari, and another devotee for temple commander, I forget. Oh, it was this like 12-year-old devotee. He was a son of Shilavati. And then, and Tamal, Krishna will be the secretary. And then he said, the secretary is the one who is the go-between between the temple president and the spiritual master. So in this way, Prabhupada expertly, instead of kicking me to the side or having me do something else, he just put Tamal above me as the go-between. So in a way, that secretary was also, that's what he later called the GBC secretary. That was the name of the GBC. So in a way, it was, although it was a year and a half or so early, it was sort of a precursor to the GBC. So then we had the vote, and of course, Prabhupada had nominated everyone, so we felt obligated to vote for Prabhupada's nominations. But we didn't like this devotee, this boy, Girish and Birbhadra. I forget which one Prabhupada had nominated. They were just like 13 years old, 13, 14, something like that. So we nominated Vishnu Jan for temple commander. So Vishnu Jan, he would wake everyone up by singing. He would come in and sing, if you can imagine. It was just very sweet to be awakened by Vishnu Jan. So then Dayananda had to go back to San Francisco because it was sort of a brain drain. That's not a very good way of putting it, but we had sort of drained all the energy out of San Francisco because all these devotees ended up in Los Angeles. So Dayananda, who was the vice president, he went to San Francisco, and then Madhudvisa, I forgot to mention him. He was the treasurer. Prabhupada had nominated him as treasurer. And he went to San Francisco also. I found out later it was because he had some disagreement with Tamal Krishna Maharaj. So that was the system, that if there were two devotees who had disagreement, then one would be sent to open a temple. Meaning, if the two devotees were sort of leaders of the temple, then one would be sent to open a temple, because obviously he was qualified. He was disagreeing with the leader. Then, so now show how you're able to do something by opening a temple. So yeah, Madhuvisa went up to San Francisco, and Dayananda was there. So I didn't see Dayananda much after that. In those days, I assume now as well, but in those days, the people that we joined with or that we were initiated with, we had a tremendous bond. That would just carry us. That we could see that person after years or something and still feel great affection. I have a friend who, like from 50 years ago, we still maintain close contact. So he likes to tell this story. Again, this is not, I don't know, it's kind of, for me it's kind of a silly story. I don't know if it's of any use to you, but he tells a story in 1974, we went to Rath Yatra from Texas, a few of us, and this devotee that I'm friends with, Rupa Vilas. So he said that we got there, and then I saw Dayananda. So then we embraced, and we started talking. And then this circle of bunch of devotees were around us, just kind of like watching that. watching this talk. So, sorry that I can't think of so many pastimes. Like, Vyasaki, of course, has written a book on Vishnu-Jan and Dayananda. So from that, you can get a lot of information. I was thinking of reading from that book or from something I could find on the internet, but I just thought I'll try to say these few stories that I remember and try to give you a little flavor also of kind of this bond that we had. When I joined the movement, I didn't know anything I didn't know there was initiation. And I'd seen the marriage ceremony. Prabhupada did the marriage ceremony. But what I called it in my mind was the group. So I made up my mind to join the group. So for me, that association was all important. Those people that I admired. I thought those were the best people that I'd ever met. Of course, Prabhupada was there, so Prabhupada was like the crown jewel, but just sort of spending time with these devotees who were there, that was all important. And Dayananda, of course, was one of those people. Yeah, I looked up to him. So, 9:07, I went overtime. Okay. So any questions or comments? Anyone? I guess we've gone overtime, so.
I was hearing Rama from share. Rama from share someone compiled the Siddhanta series. Memories of
Dayananda, yeah.
Like an hour long. So
Yeah.
I was watching that last night, and the pastime you mentioned about the Gayatri of Sridhar Maharaj, another devotee mentioned.
Oh, that was on there?
Yeah, but he mentioned the even, I guess more intimate revelation of it with where how Prabhupada had come in to teach the devotees, to teach them again how to chant the Gayatri.
Yeah.
And then he was hearing how Dayananda, recite the mantras, and he just started laughing. Prabhupada just started laughing, just said, hopeless. Anyway, he said, just chant whatever, because you're so sincere, Krishna will accept it.
Yeah. Yeah, that was the way. Yeah, we didn't know how to speak Sanskrit. Yamuna's, she was always a little embarrassed that her song was sung in every temple, but then she mispronounces a couple of things in the, Govindamadi Purusham. So she confided me a couple times that, I didn't know. I just learned from the tape. That's how we learned. We didn't have anything written out for these songs. Samsara, the Brahma Samhita, and we learned from Prabhupada singing. So that's how she learned that she learned. The fact that she learned, I was so impressed. Then later, of course, we found out pronunciation. So that's understandable. Yes.
So a quick question. You said, and thank you so much for sharing. That was really just such a nectar class. you mentioned sort of at the end here how the association was everything. It was because of the group, it was because of the personalities that you even came in the first place, that you got involved. So, like, what can you say about what we can learn from these personalities in terms of how to develop a good atmosphere? Like an atmosphere like of association that is attractive and that is, you know, cultivating each other nicely. You understand my question?
Well, Shraddha comes first. We associate with devotees, then we have a little faith, and then sadhu sangha. I was just listening, I can't remember what he said, but I was listening to one of these 5-minute snippets that somebody puts on the YouTube of Prabhupada talking about sadhu sangha. And it seems to me that everything goes back to sadhu sangha, even if we have some difficulty. We don't make it to Nishta. We're stuck on the bhajana, kriya platform, but even that's a little weak. But we can always rest on sadhu sangha, as long as we're associating with devotees. In my view, I think that that's also what Rupa Goswami is saying, and Prabhupada reinforces. Sadhu sangha is all important. So we have to make sure that we connect nicely with others as sadhus and receive it also from others. Sangha means attachment. That Dhyaito Vishayan Pungsa Sangha Steshu Pajayate. Sangha means attachment. So from meditating, we get attached to the sense objects. Vishayan, that's sense object. So we contemplate, and then we get attached. So sadhu sangha, that's the thing. Attachment. We need to get attachment to the sadhus. That's really an important step in our... Yes?
Thank you for such a wonderful class and sharing some of your lovely pastimes. I was just wondering if you could share with us, so Dayananda's Samadhi is in a Jagannath temple that's right next to Mayapur. Could you explain how it came to be there, how it came about there?
I don't know.
Okay.
Sorry.
Okay.
You look kind of like Dayananda. Yes, Prabhu.
I'm curious, what either personal relationship with devotees or situations do you feel gave you the most spiritual advancement or just got you deeper into Krishna consciousness in general? What, like relationships with devotees or situations you feel really pushed you forward the most?
Well, I cheated. I had a personal relationship with Prabhupada, so... I often cheat like that. I don't know, somehow or other, Krishna's arrangement. So, yeah, also Krishna, somehow or other, I cheated in another way because I joined a little bit before a lot of these devotees, and so they never kind of they never hassled me, but then I was able to appreciate them so much, like Tamal Krishna Maharaj. I just loved Tamal Krishna Maharaj because I could see his good qualities, but then he never kind of put me under his thumb, so I guess I'm somehow a big cheater. Maybe we should... But you're saying, what was the question again? Let me just...
Yeah, I was asking like what personal relationship with the devotee or even situation, maybe building a temple, running a temple, XYZ, do you feel really propelled you most spiritually in terms of getting you more deeply grounded?
Okay, the greatest, for me, that still remains is this idea that Tamal Krishna Maharaj and others, a few others, I mean, that maybe, I don't know if I should say their names or not, some of them have had difficulties but that they strategized with Prabhupada for preaching. I came to appreciate that probably more than anything else, that they could develop a strategy for preaching. Brahmananda and Garg Muni went to the streets with a book table. There were a couple of the first book distributors, big book distributors. Others were distributing back to Gaudiya. So strategy, thinking, okay, Prabhupada's putting pressure on us. Get these teachings of the Lord Chaitanya out of the storage, get them distributed. So devotees are feeling that, okay, I've got to develop some strategy. And there's no place you can read in the book, or you can depend on Prabhupada's letters or conversations. It's not a formula. You can't just follow a formula and then this will happen, that we'll just follow this formula and then people will somehow take books or come or something. You have to use your intelligence and strategize on your own level. So I really appreciated those devotees. And a lot of them are not around, but I remember them in their ability to do something for Prabhupada and to develop methods. One devotee wrote to Prabhupada and said, he was the temple president of Detroit, and he said, Prabhupada, I would really like to see your books published in French and German and other European languages. So Prabhupada wrote back and says, you're GBC of France, Germany, and other European countries. So that, like that, I appreciated that vision that devotees have. But that's just my personal. And book distributors. I came to really admire book distributors.
Give Dayananda the last one. His name is Dayananda Das. And his Guru Maharaj said, be like Dayananda when you initiate.
Oh, really?
I have just one question. What's the best thing that Dayananda told you? What inspires you?
What inspires me?
Yeah, from Dayananda's words, what he told you, like in your personal conversation or association with him.
Well, we were friends. I mean, you have to have friends in Krishna consciousness. Rupa Goswami says that, you have different exchanges with devotees. Advanced devotees is one kind of exchange. Juniors you give shelter to, but you have also friends. So it's his friendship that inspired me. Without friends, I wouldn't be here. I mean, without my devotee friends. And I consider a lot of them friends. Now I say, oh, he's my friend, But it sounds almost disrespectful. I mean, Tamal Krishna, I love to say Tamal, because a lot of us, when we talk among ourselves, we just say Tamal, this, that, Tamal. But it's just feelings of affection. Then we feel that we have kind of the right to be intimate like that and not use the title because of affection. So without that affection for other devotees, and I feel privileged to be able to be affectionate to somebody like that. It's not like because I'm friends it's not a lack of respect or not seeing him as an advanced devotee or something like that. Any of them. I sometimes I'm a little embarrassed when I speak to you that I say, oh, he's my friend, you know. But, you know, it's embarrassing because they're so exalted, these devotees. Okay, so we've gone too far over time now. Hare Krishna. Thank you very much. So you'll all be